Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, and with me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, and fourth nicknameless nickname, Brian. Say hey, Brian.
Good evening.
You can.
Well, the trade deadline in the NBA is coming up, Dre. There's lots of rumors. There's been some actual trades and all kinds of bedlam in the NBA. So, yeah, good time of year to be doing a show, I think.
And good time to be talking about speed runs in video games. So what we're going to do, we're going to start by talking about the superb owl that we just all saw. There was this superb owl on the weekend that many of us saw. Odd related note, by where I live by the Fox River in Wisconsin. And there have been a bunch of people, I think they're bird watching because they're like taking pictures by the river. So I'm playing Pokemon and these people are like bird watching. And it's kind of, I've always thought bird watching is funny because it's basically like the analog version of Pokemon Go. And it's funny where you can have essentially two, I'm sure both groups of people, the people that see me either drive by or walk by and then, get out with my phone and tap it a few times and walk off or drive off. And me seeing them, we're like looking at each other strange. But it's all the same. But anyway, so we're going to talk the Super Bowl, of course. We're going to talk all things NBA. We're going to talk video games. We got to talk video games, Brian, particularly speed runs and just the insanity that goes on in there that matches, the steroid scandal, oddly enough. And yeah, then we'll talk some economics about sports, and that should be good. All right, so the Super Bowl. I'm already going to show how much I don't know football and I forgot. So Brian, you prove this to me though. There was a defensive player on the New England Patriots that was benched. And this is all sorts of controversy. So first off, who's the name? Even though I've read it like 20 times.
Yeah, his name is Malcolm. I forget his last name right now. Let's see. Let's look it up. I'm gonna do search live, Dre, for Malcolm Patriots. Let's see what that is.
It Butler?
Malcolm Butler. You got it. Yeah.
So he's 27. He's 27 years old. Apparently, it's been a big thing.
He was a Pro Bowler in 2015, but did not have a great year this year, apparently.
And I guess I've been reading. This is always kind of interesting to me. And we can also harken back a little to your Warriors with Draymond Green. I guess
sore subject, Dre, but go ahead.
But I guess some of the issue with him and Belichick was, breaking the rules, breaking curfew, whatever. So they were saying, I guess what I've been reading, and I haven't read in depth in this, so this is the fascinating part. It was more disciplinary. It wasn't performance based. Yeah. And of course, the Patriots defense just was horrible. Admittedly, that's the game we all wanted, right? We wanted a shootout. I think it had the most yards in Super Bowl history. I think it's possibly even NFL history or something.
Yeah, Brady threw for 500 yards in the loss or something, right?
It was definitely absurd. Now, it's also, I guess it proves an interesting point, too, about football that I'm pretty sure is true, and I know is true in basketball, which is the finals MVP, I guess, has to go to the game winner. Because, 500 yards, no interceptions in the Super Bowl. I'd have given it to Brady, and it's funny. There was a very real reality. There was a very stark reality about Brady because I tweeted out about him right after, and someone made a comment about him being a white supremacist and obviously had a "Make America Great Again" hat and all that.
Yep.
There's a very stark reality in sports where I've kind of come to this, and it sucks. If you are going to be a sports fan, you accept that many of the people that do many of the impressive things that you like may not be nice people off the court, and in fact, in many cases, are horrible people. And I've even made this assertion before, which is weird, which is it is impossible to get to the highest level of professional sports, meaning a multiple finals MVP, a multiple title holder, etc., while being normal. I just do not think it's possible. Like a very funny thing that, just becomes real looking at other things. And this was an odd one. I'm on a huge tangent. It's what I do, Brian. A Pokemon Go YouTuber that I really like, his name's Reversal. He's Dutch. I realized one thing I liked about him is one of my favorite professors in college is Dutch. And so he's Dutch as well. So I love that accent. Okay. So anyway, he recently released a video that said, hey, I have this channel where I talk about Pokemon Go. I regularly talk about a place that I raid at. I went there to raid the other day. Some fans showed up. They said they'd driven an hour, and then they were just really, really being demanding of his time and asking him to answer questions and kept trying to peek over his shoulder to look at his phone and, see personal stuff like about his Pokemon Go account, whatever.
Was he streaming at the time?
I don't believe he was streaming. And I mean, he definitely does do, regardless, he does do live streams at time too. But, to that point, he was saying, I came out here, I had a plan in mind. It's nice that you're here, but that does not entitle you to my attention. But just the simple point to get this all back is as soon as you get moderately well known enough, your external lifestyle changes, right? There are athletes that, you can't go out in public in certain places if you're an athlete without knowing you're going to get approached by fans asking for autographs. And then, reading about a lot of pro athletes. I was reading about like Tiger Woods and Kobe this week for some reason about, just the familial problems they have where, they have family members that do weird things. There was a fantastic related, this is why it's on my brain, Brian, Dan Harmon on Harmontown. I had John Mayer, I believe that's how you say his name, the guitar
musician. Yeah,
musician. That would have been musician.
What did I say? Musician? No, I meant to say musician.
He's both magical and does. Oh God, I hope there's not such a thing. But they were, talking about these weird things that relate with how you deal with fame. So I just, it's a rough one, but it's like if you get that big and that famous, it's hard for you to be a normal person that any of us would know how to interact with. Man, I'm just throwing weird things that I listen to all over the place. I forget his name, the Smashing Pumpkins lead singer and lyricist.
Oh, yeah. Billy Corgan.
Beautiful. Wow, you were on top of it all today. I was watching a podcast with him on Joe Rogan, and they were talking about weird stuff like that.
He's a really far out there guy.
He's awesome. He's into wrestling. I mean, I love this guy. He's amazing.
Doesn't he run a wrestling promotion?
Oh my God, we're way too off script, so I'm going to get back. Look up Billy Corgan. That's how you say it, right? And TNA/Impact Wrestling, and then I think he owns the NWA now. It's great stuff. But he was talking about that too, where you'll have a family member that you don't know, and then you get big, and they come out of nowhere. So it's like anybody that gets that big is just not normal to begin with, and a lot of them get away with a lot of awful things, a lot of horrible things we don't like. We've brought this up many, many times. So it's always a hard thing. I say this as the person who's like, why do I have to give a damn about Kobe Bryant? He's gotten enough accolades. I don't have to keep saying he's great. He's gotten enough, especially for all his off-court bullshit. So I realize it's interesting, but I talked about Tom Brady being impressive. He's 40. I can't believe he played well. And just the stark reality immediately of this Super Bowl in particular, because we're going to talk that a little too, about how the Super Bowl just very starkly brings in how you can't even really enjoy sports for a moment right now because there's so much other stuff tied, especially to the NFL, right? There are going to be athletes from the Super Bowl that aren't going to go to the White House. Had the Patriots won, some of them would have. It would have been very interesting. So impressiveness to Tom Brady. I'm going to give a shout out to Dave Barry. I forget if this was at Forbes or HuffPo. He's written at lots of places, but he just pointed out. And one of my favorite tweets, and I think I was the only one that retweeted it, where he just said, you're going to win this game, Eagles, if you just run the ball, something that the Seahawks and the Falcons didn't realize. Be a smarter bird. And I thought it was hilarious. But the point being, in the last 3 Super Bowls with Tom Brady, the outcome was ostensibly decided by a combination of the defense and the opposing team's play calling. And so this just brings into reality about, and we've said this about like Kobe as well, how people will give a player credit for team success when you look at it and you go, let's say the Seahawks run the ball, and I think there was like a 20-yard sack or something, right? And they were in field goal range. He got sacked outside of field goal range, and they lost the game. And then the Falcons, something similar. They threw the ball, I think got intercepted, and then Tom Brady came back. And then in this game, right, Tom Brady actually gets they were up by I think 3, right, or something at one point. Tom Brady gets
it was back and forth in the fourth quarter.
Tom Brady gets a touchdown and everybody's like, F, they're gonna win. The Eagles come back and score a touchdown and you're like, heck yeah. But and then they get the ball back and it's like, if they had done something stupid and Brady gets the ball back, there goes the game. So it's funny to say, people will say, count the rings to Tom Brady, or he's Super Bowl MVP for these games. And it's like, as we were just saying at the beginning, I would argue Tom Brady, he would, if I had a vote, he would have gotten my Super Bowl MVP unless there's explicit rules about it has to be from the winning team. He loses 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs if the opposing team's play calling is different. And just, worth noting. And then, like I said, Draymond Green, same kind of issue with Malcolm Butler, where I guess he's been having lots of attitude problems and getting in fights and all that. And somebody made the astute.
So for Malcolm Butler, there's a really specific thing, which is supposedly Belichick or someone else found him smoking weed. So that was it. They're like, you're going to smoke weed Super Bowl week, you're out. That was it.
Wow. Okay, I got to go off on this tangent too because I've read this about professional wrestlers. I believe like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash is the one who's talked a lot about this because he's a very cynical guy. You know, a lot of the rest. What's
You
interesting
have
is
to be survived that long, right? At his
kind
level.
of like Mick Foley is one of my favorites, as I bring up all the time, and it's like I keep saying this, and I keep hoping he proves me wrong. His brain's going to be gone in a few years. It's physically, if you watch his matches, it's like physically impossible for that not to be the case. And so some of the wrestlers that have survived, we've talked about this really weird sports mentality of you got to give it your all and you're a wuss if you don't do this. And the stuff we hate, the stupid machismo, and the fact the XFL is coming back trying to argue that point, and it's depressing. So like the people that are successful that are still seem to have their faculties and are healthy, a lot of them are very jaded. And you hear them in interviews, and they'll shrug their shoulders and say, another one, Al Snow says it too, where he's like, I'm just here for a payday, and I know it. And I show up, and people get upset with me, and I'm like, well, this is a business, and here's how you survive the business, and here's what you need to do. He was talking about how annoying it was with the wellness policy in WWE with weed as well, where he's going, you've got these people that can just load up their bodies with painkillers. And, that's the opioid epidemic in the United States, one of the hugest things. It is perfectly legitimate. And I'm sure in the NFL, it's the same too. Right? You can get a cortisone shot. You can load up your body with this. So if they said that, I'm just hearkening back to Kevin Nash, who's like, you're not allowed to smoke weed. These guys that have pain issues, if you just let them smoke weed instead of other things, they might have been in a better situation.
It's turning a little, but not for Belichick.
Alcohol's another similar one. It's one of the saddest stories I know from WWE history, unrelated to a lot of the concussion stuff. But Andre the Giant, he had giganticism and was just still growing, and his body basically was falling apart on him towards the end. And the doctors said, we don't have painkillers that are effective enough for you, so drink alcohol. So that's okay.
Oh, I knew he drank. I didn't know the doctors told him to. That's interesting.
Well, it's a combination, yeah. And then a lot of his, he couldn't go out in public because everybody recognized him, a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
So enough tangents on the Super Bowl without talking about the Super Bowl.
I got one for you. Speaking of Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, great show at Hood Slam with the NWO parody takeover. Brittany Wonder played the Razor Ramon character. That was awesome. Anyway, so Tom Brady, though, I mean, I agree with mostly what you're saying, but I'll push back a little. I'll coin a new phrase, Dre, right now. With great power comes great responsibility. If you've got all that money and all that influence, I mean, well, look at it this way. Like, compare him to, say, me. If I went into my workplace and acted the way Tom Brady was, I'd just get fired, right? They'd be like, who is this asshole? I'm not a high performer like he is, obviously. So should you get away with stuff just because you're able to, because you're powerful? I don't know. So you're right. A lot of people in his position do act the way he does, but some of them don't. Like, a lot of high-profile athletes are actually legitimate.
I want to put on the point I was making there, where I was just basically saying sports gets very rough because if you take even 2 seconds, I'll try and maybe find the article. It's one of my favorites, right? The Friend Zone comic, where they talked about like the fun of fantasy football, because they're like, do you want to vote, the domestic abuser or, this person that did these horrible things or whatever. Just rooting for sports is very hard, and it's becoming more and more apparent. So that's all I was saying, is that
that's true.
Worse behind the scenes with that. And then I'm even just saying in the best circumstance, they're not normal, and in the worst, they can be horrible. And to your point, like, it just sucks because, like a lot of these people, they've gotten away with a lot. And kind of an interesting, I'm just showing lots of stuff that I like reading and watching, whatever. It's on Tommy Dreamer, I believe, or not Tommy Dreamer, I forget his last name, Tommy Gunn in the Rocky movies. I forget his real name. There's a documentary about him, and he was just
that's Morrison. Tommy Morrison?
Is that it? Okay.
I think so. Yeah, he died of AIDS, I think.
Yeah, he died of AIDS. He had lots of issues. He won the title from George Foreman, but had lots of, drugs, alcohol, sex, lots of, that. But you listen to it, and basically he's set for an $8 million payday at the end of the road, right? And all these people that are around him, his entourage, the people, his trainers, his managers, they're basically going, we need to get you to that. We're worth a percentage of you. You get to that, we're set. And so if he's slowly falling off the deep end, which is what was happening, as he approaches that, you've got this very annoying conflict of interest dichotomy, which is you have people going, I should be saying this isn't okay, or I should get him to stop, right? I should say, if you keep doing this, I'm going to have to give you more painkillers and that's bad for your body or whatever. But them going, but if I do that to you, and admittedly, it's like the funny thing about Belichick, right? We're looking at it going, why on earth with the Super Bowl on the line are you going to choose to take a stand? Because in sports, to the exact point you're saying, we let athletes get away with so much just because it means we get a title or our school gets a title, which means money, or we're their manager and we get money, et cetera. So it's just messed up. This is a very Jerry Maguire start to the show, which I mean, just is football in a nutshell.
I mean, it could be like a straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing, right? Like Butler maybe wasn't as playing well as he had in the last couple years, and then the disciplinary thing, and then Belichick's like, well, fuck you, I'm Bill Belichick. How about that? And I mean, and the other thing is, so I don't know enough about football these days to know if the guy who replaced him really screwed up. Like that was reported that they would just target him every time, and you know, as we know, we always question the NBA media narrative, so I'm not going to trust the NFL media narrative blindly.
Well, and this is what's hard, and I want to shout this out to you if this makes you bristle. So this is the throwback. We talk a lot about racism on the show, and I'm not going to get away with the NFL without not mentioning the national anthems and rioting. So we're going to get there in a second. A lot of racism that is hard to deal with in the world, but United States in particular, is basically implicit. We have years and years and years of these small little signals, these nudges, right? A lot of the new hotness is behavioral psychology. Richard Thaler won a Nobel Prize. He won it for his book is called Nudge, and this book is all about these tiny little things, right? If I want my employees to invest in a 401k, the right way to do it is to say, I'm going to automatically invest you into a 2050, 2060, whatever, right? 401k, you know, this mix of stocks, bonds, whatever,
right? Managed account.
Most companies, or used to, we'll see how it goes. A lot of companies would do matching on 401ks. 401ks are good both for retirement, and then matching is just free money. But they would find a lot of people wouldn't sign up, and you're like, what the hell? And it turns out the right maneuver is you auto opt them in with an option to opt out. A very easy option to opt out. You send them an email that says you've automatically been enrolled. We're going to put 5% of your paycheck in this 401k with this default setting. If you don't want this, just click no. Very easy, right? But a lot of companies, you have to opt in, and then the opt-in takes a lot of work, and so people get frustrated or forget and don't do it. And then a lot of, kind of manipulative websites and stuff. We all know this trick, right? You go to some site and you sign up for deliver fresh bananas to my house once a month. And you inadvertently forget there's a click box that says, send me a newsletter. There's a click box that says, send me new offers. And then suddenly you're getting every day you're getting some email about like the best banana and how to upgrade your account and all that jazz. So in terms of the world, there are all these small, tiny, implicit things that over the course of many years of history basically push a lot of us to act racist in the United States without even thinking about it. And sports shows this a lot. And the way I'll tie this into one of our subjects is I've noticed a lot of people talking about Cam Newton versus Tom Brady. Cam Newton got destroyed in the Super Bowl by the amazing Broncos defense. Go Von Miller, Finals MVP. After the Super Bowl, he's in a bad mood. He doesn't shake hands with the opposing quarterback or team. He's very terse in his exit interview, and everybody's like, look at this guy. Look at this spoiled athlete who doesn't know how to win. And then you look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady acts almost identical. This is one thing I want to bash. His wife, Giselle, who many know this is interesting. I think she's worth more money than Tom Brady, which is awesome.
I believe that's true.
She told their daughter, she was like, well, sometimes you have to let the other guy win. And I was like, F that. What entitled BS and what kind of losery, like sore loser talk that is. There was, I forget the guy's name, but there's a famous teacher that wrote like a book and then was in a movie starring Matthew Perry. And in his book, he actually, like, one of his rules is like, be a good winner. When you lose, you just tell them good game. You never give excuses, whatever. So F that. But same point, right? The Brady family, the Brady line or whatever, the Giselle family, if we're going to go by top earner, right? They were sore losers. They were bad losers, but one of those is going to get harsher treatment than the other. I'm going to talk about the riots, right? Like Philadelphia fans, no matter what happens, they riot. And that a lot of astute people, a lot of woke people, so to speak, have noted that, people rioting for sports does not get the same disdain from the public as, quote unquote, rioting. The reason I put rioting in quotes is that there can be marches for Black Lives Matter or whatever, And then if property gets destroyed, it's defined as there was a riot at this event, or they were rioting, as opposed to saying property was damaged in this thing. Whereas fans can essentially riot after their team wins or loses a big game. And it's, you'll see the media headlines as, exuberant fans do this, or crazy fans do this, or whatever, right? Happy fans do this.
Photos of them overturning cars.
Yeah. So, but to that point, there are these small implicit things that over years and years and years show how we treat people different. And so in the NFL, so this is the bristle point back to Malcolm Butler, it's just that, like, there's this weird implicit, they should shut up and get in line. This is the national anthem with football. And that's been years of just all of us have been conditioned to believe a black athlete is not supposed to speak out. And there's a lot of stuff in United States history. And just, I'm not asking for a major change. I'm not condemning you if you bristle a little when I say it, but all I want to throw out there is just that there are many systems in place that will take years to change, and we're on a path to that. So that's the positive thing. Even with Trump, I'm going to stay optimistic. There's progress, right? I am a product of an interracial marriage. And according to the statistics, interracial marriage was less favorable than gay marriage was in 2008. When my parents got married, that was viewed less favorably than gay marriage was even 10 years ago. Lots changed. A lot can still change. But there's still a lot to work through. And just football, it shows that up a lot. When you've got a white coach benching a black athlete for smoking weed before a key game, and people being on the side saying they can't act out. Well, his quarterback is being a jerk and the quarterback's wife is being a jerk.
Now, to be fair, I'm just reading, like, that's something someone wrote. We don't really know what's going on inside of Bill Belichick's head. I'm speculating on that.
Well, and that's what makes it hard, is because if you might talk to Bill Belichick back and forth and view his actions, and there would not be anything overtly racist. That is the key. The key is...
But he's very paternal, though.
He's very paternal. And what I'm saying, this is like the whole nudge point, right? Let's say you look inside your head. We might talk like video games in a bit. And there's a setting for how angry I get when people act out. And if we're honest with ourselves, which many people won't be, but we should be, that dial is going to be slightly, and this is the key, slightly different for things like gender and race. And so that just means the same action, there's this threshold, and sometimes when it crosses, and we've noticed this, by the way, in prison systems too, the same crime will get harsher penalties for minorities than white people. Also, time of the day affects things too. It's all arbitrary, Brian. But that's all I'm saying is, like, when we talk about sports and we're like, there is racism in sports and people get up in arms, it's like, I'm not talking overt racism. I'm talking a lot of years of systems in place with slightly different thresholds. And then when these compound on themselves, you notice weird things. This was way longer than I expected. And if we still got you, then you're definitely a fan. You're the people we want around. If we keep you through video games, man, you might be a different person than EJ Fisher. I used to joke when we talked Spurs more and sci-fi that EJ Fisher was our prime audience. Whoever makes it through video games, you're our prime audience.
Yeah, we haven't talked Spurs enough this season, but there'll be time. In the coming weeks.
It's so rough. I mean, the Spurs problem. So we'll get to the NBA. Well, let's give the Spurs some due. Where are they sitting right now without Kawhi? That's the key point. So the Spurs are still third. I mean, the Spurs and Cavaliers are two very interesting, different stories, right? The Spurs are third in their conference, 34-31. So, they're only a half a game in front of Minnesota. Obviously, they're still light years behind the Warriors and the Rockets. But if Kawhi comes back healthy, this is a big if, and the comparison I've given is the 2006 Spurs, who fell to the number 2 seed because Tim Duncan was out injured. In the first round of the playoffs, they went up against my Denver Nuggets, who had the best record post-All-Star break in NBA history, and then my Nuggets got destroyed because Tim Duncan was back, and the reality is that bastard Spurs team was the best team in the West. The Nuggets should have gotten at least one more round. I think we could have taken the Suns. Anyway, but the Spurs are third in their division. Or conference, sorry. Cavs are third in their conference. Spurs, if Kawhi comes back healthy, they're in great shape. Cleveland is dead. Like, I think Arturo has been, American Numbers on Twitter, if you don't follow him, has been posting a lot. Like, his simulations have the Spurs like 2/3 to miss the playoffs. Now, admittedly, here's the thing. I was looking this up the other day, Brian. The Spurs have 2 players. They have LeBron James playing great.
They're the Cavaliers.
The Cavaliers. I said Spurs, sorry. So Cavaliers. They have LeBron James playing great. They have Kevin Love playing great. Kevin Love is out injured. Their third best player, if you saw this tweet, you know it, but
Kyle Korver. Yep.
Kyle Korver with 2 wins in this season is their third best player. Kyle Korver with 2 wins is the Spurs' best player.
So to be fair, he hasn't played a lot of minutes. His per minute production isn't bad, but still, he's like in his mid-30s. Like, this is not good for the Cavaliers.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Is when I'm saying Kyle Korver with 2 wins is the 3rd best total wins producer on the team. I mean, we bash some players, right? Like I forget off the top of my head, like Jay Crowder is probably near 2 wins, and he's our big sad mark for the season, right? Because our thought was essentially Jay Crowder for Kyrie Irving, provided, this was the rough part, provided that the Cleveland Cavaliers got like a point guard, which they didn't do. Jay Crowder is a great fit on that team, and he just has not really, he's played okay. He's lived up to his contract, sadly, because he's very cheap. But Jay Crowder has underperformed, and Kyrie's overperformed, and Isaiah Thomas is just not the same player. So anyway, just 2 very different stories. The Cavaliers might not make the playoffs this season, and then obviously like word around the campfire. How did I get rude from that? Word around the campfire is that like LeBron James is basically sticking it to the team, where they want to trade him, they're upset with him. Obviously, he could go anywhere at this point if he wanted to, but he's got a no trade clause, and he's like, I'm going to finish out my season with Cleveland.
So do you want to get into some of these Cavaliers links that I have, Dre?
Let's talk about the Cavs, and I'll respond.
So first, this is from yesterday on Real GM. There's no link, so I guess it's their reporting. Looks like Jason Lloyd of The Athletic down at the bottom. Very small link, Real GM. Oh. Anyway, Dan Gilbert and Kobe Altman don't have relationship with LeBron James. Kobe Altman is their GM, who's 35 years old, right? So that's astounding to hear that. If just to read briefly from this, according to multiple sources, he does not have a relationship with either Dan Gilbert or Kobe Altman. He was close with David Griffin, the former general manager. James doesn't trust the Cavaliers' current front office, reportedly currently yelled and cursed at multiple executives during the team meeting a few weeks ago. And basically the belief around the Cavaliers is that Gilbert is in full control of the roster, and Altman is a front man. So this Mr. Comic Sans owner himself, Dan Gilbert, is calling the personnel shots. I mean, I can see why this relationship with LeBron has deteriorated. Now, to be fair, like LeBron's getting a lot of criticism now too, that he's a prima donna or something, whatever. He's still a great player.
It's fascinating where I've seen a lot of good players, like Michael Jordan, for example, is one of them, and like even Kobe Bryant, whatever, you listen to what the players would want you to do, and you're like, oh dear God, I don't want you running this team. Yeah. But the front office is right either. So I don't think based on LeBron's takes, the roster he would put together would win, but I don't trust the Cavaliers, particularly Gilbert. And it's funny, I was debating this point in my head. I don't know who had a worse offseason, Cleveland or Chicago, because Cleveland got Derrick Rose, Jeff Green, Dwayne Wade, and he didn't even last, Jose Calderon, right? That's who they acquired in this offseason. Whereas, Chicago basically traded away like 3 playoff spots to multiple teams at this point. So it's rough. Like it's weird to be like, you can be on someone's side and not on their side. I'm like, you're right. This front office sucks, but that doesn't mean we should listen to you. We just shouldn't listen to them.
Doesn't seem like anyone is right here as far as front office stuff is going, including LeBron. Now what I've got up now is a tweet from, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but it looks like Dr. R2 Diza. And it says, LeBron's passive-aggressive hatred towards Isaiah Thomas has me in tears. He doesn't want to play offense when IT is running possessions. And there's a few videos of LeBron just standing around doing nothing when the Cavaliers are on offense. So it's kind of been coming out this week that I guess all of Isaiah Thomas's former teammates and media figures covering those teams in Boston, Sacramento Kings, wherever else he's played, Phoenix Suns as well, in between those, that he's just not a good teammate, that everyone's kicking him while he's down right now, right? So
this is what bugs me, and we were talking this like NFL at the start. It is so freaking annoying to see in sports this belief of, I got along with people, ergo I was a good teammate. Because the goal, right, this is why we're the, cold calculating eggheads, where our point is your goal is to win games. And everything points to that, right? Winning games makes you money. Winning games get you titles. Win games, win games, win games, win games, win games. If we had a mantra, if we were a coach that was mic'd up and said the same stupid stuff over and over and over again, we would just say win games, win games, win games over and over and over again. If Isaiah Thomas's teammates didn't like him, and this was something similar, I recall Rondo was the same, right? Like teammates were like, he annoys us. We don't care what he has to say, blah, 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 blah. I've seen people kick Kevin Love in similar ways at times, right? It's like, does this person play the game of basketball in their role the way they are supposed to? And at least for 3 teams before this one, right, with Phoenix, with Sacramento, with Boston, Isaiah Thomas has played as a competent point guard, possibly with limited defensive capabilities, but whatever, right? He's done his job. So his teammates being like, none of us really liked him, whatever. It's like, well, who gives a damn? And in fact, the rough part, right, if we've talked about like being the basketball or the Boxscore Geeks agents or front offices, like if I was an agent, I'd be like, I don't give a damn if you like a teammate. If they win games and don't hog the ball. So admittedly, that's one area, Isaiah Thomas, and he is currently hurting the Cavaliers with this. If you have a teammate that hogs the ball and doesn't shoot well, they are the worst of both worlds because they are costing you wins and they are costing you shots. So Isaiah Thomas's teammates being upset with him in the past, it's like, well, actually helped you win games. Now, admittedly, on the Suns and Kings, where they're teams that are losing, it's like, well, that doesn't really help. So I can see them being mad. Boston, no, they tried to give him a ceremony or whatever, so who knows there. But it is annoying for me to see people go, we didn't like this guy, ergo he's a bad teammate. To me, a bad teammate is a player that doesn't play the game to win games or to help your stats, and usually helping your stats wins games because all the ways that they can help your stats, assists, etc., do that. So it's kind of annoying. And then what's extra annoying about kicking Isaiah Thomas when he's down is he's in a contract year. He's coming back from injury. So admittedly, he's not going to be the same. And I think athletes know this, right? Isaiah Thomas is taking all the shots he can because he knows if I score lots of points and look like I still have something left in the tank, a team will give me money. But if I don't, I won't get money or I'll be forced to take a reduced contract with the Cavs. So it's another, like, there are no real winners here, only losers. Like, I can see Isaiah's point and I can see everybody else's point, but it just seems like at this point, said point way too many times there, Brian, at this juncture, how's that? The Cleveland Cavaliers are just a dumpster fire, and it's amusing to watch.
And I think that's part of why this is all coming out is, just schadenfreude from the general NBA community on this. And I think part of it is related to him criticizing the coach, Lou, there. And fans are just saying, well, if you're going to criticize the coach, you're part of the problem. You're not actually helping, with your play. It
bugs me too there. Like, a lot of people, we've talked about this before, a lot of people take like criticism as a personal dig. And it can be rough where, if things are going bad, this is always weird to me when people like Knicks fans, for instance, we might talk to them a bit with Porzingis out. Like you talk about the problems their team has, like, shut up, you're just a Porzingis hater or whatever. And you're like, your team doesn't win games. Like, your team hasn't made the playoffs in 5 years or whatever. Like, are you really going to sit here and defend and say that there are no, just the weird blindness of saying there are no problems? If you're going to sit here and say there are no problems with the Cavaliers right now, you're just deluding yourself. Isaiah Thomas might have his finger on some of them, although admittedly, him getting back and Kevin Love getting injured is like the death knell. So it's just really the question, can LeBron James from the start of the season come back and will them to a playoffs? And even then, they're not making the finals barring a miracle, and I don't see it happening. I mean, I don't see any players that, like, one of the miracle teams that made a finals was the 1999 New York Knicks, and basically Marcus Camby, who had up until that point in his career never been good, played like an MVP caliber player in the playoffs, carried him on his back to a finals before getting snuffed out by the Spurs. There was Clyde Drexler getting traded to the aging Rockets. Like, the Rockets won the title, and the next year they just didn't look as good. They get Clyde Drexler there, I believe the 6th seed, but Clyde Drexler plays like a freaking MVP. They go on and win a title, and who knows? The Magic were weird. Like, I don't know if they had issues or whatever. So just the point being, there have been teams that have had miracle finals runs or teams that have had miracle wins. I just don't see any Deus Ex Machina for the Cavaliers at this point. I don't see any young players that can bust out. I don't see any old players that are going to come back amazingly. We'll just see if they can make the playoffs.
Yeah, so I've got the Basketball Reference season page open right now, and Cavaliers' record is still fine, right? They're 30-22. They're positioned for a playoff spot. But their SRS is terrible and it's plummeting. They're down to 19th now in SRS, which means they should be expected to have a 25-27 record based on Pythagorean wins. So, and they don't have Kevin Love now. So, yeah, that's pretty bad for them. They need to make some kind of a trade. The trades I'm reading about don't sound very interesting, though. Like, supposedly they want to unload Tristan Thompson's contract. That's weird. I don't think he has a bad contract. He's a good player for them.
He's been injured and not as good. And I think he even at the start of the season said something akin to, like, I don't think I'll ever play full minutes again.
Oh, so he might just be damaged goods at this point.
And then, but to your point, they're not going to get anything good back from him. So that's the problem, right? If the Cavaliers are going to make a trade, it has to improve the team. All they've got are expensive assets that if they traded, they're going to trade for other,
But to state the obvious, to state the obvious, the same thing that we said about the Clippers, right? The Clippers front office and ownership screwed up by not a year or two ago when they bought the team saying, look, Chris Paul, you're our guy, not Doc Rivers, right? So, I mean, Dan Gilbert obviously screwed things up with LeBron James. Like, maybe LeBron is an egotist and, maybe it wasn't going to work out in Cleveland and you need to trade him or something like that. But just letting this drag on the way it is and letting him just play and not have a relationship with him, like, you're going to burn down the franchise unnecessarily. So I don't know.
The reality is this franchise without LeBron James is nothing anyway. And I think this is just, we've said this a lot too. They're just bad franchises, right? Like this is why the draft doesn't work, because you give a number one pick to the Cavaliers and they pick, I just dropped his name. This makes me feel really bad. Worst ever, probably the worst number one pick, Anthony Bennett. You pick Anthony Bennett.
Okay.
You give the Spurs a number. It's not a hard one. And in fact, we saw this. You give the Spurs the 15 to 30 pick 4 years in a row. You give the Cavaliers the 15 to 30 pick, the number 1 to number 3 pick 4 years in a row. The Spurs are going to win. The Spurs are going to construct a better team with those picks than the Cavaliers. So that's just the issue. I've never been impressed with this team, and that's what's interesting. I don't think LeBron James would be a good general manager. I just don't think this team has ever been that well run. And they lucked into LeBron wanting to come back and the only real player being available at the time being Kevin Love. And that's it, right? Like LeBron James said, I'll come back if you get another star. They got Kevin Love. That's fantastic. But then it's just not surprising to see that over time this team atrophies like it has before, makes dumb moves, and they're just going to be in a bad spot. And the kind of capper on this I want to give is my thought, and I hate what it will do to my mentions in the future, is I would love LeBron James to just go to Philadelphia. I think LeBron James at the end of the season could sign on with Philadelphia, an extra year of aging for Ben Simmons, an extra year of aging for Joel Embiid, maybe some reduced load thanks to LeBron James. Put LeBron James on that. Well, that was a weird way. I said it like that meme. Put LeBron James on that team, though. They're a contender at least next season. So that's my hope.
So supposedly DeAndre Jordan is their main target in trades. That's great. Like he's a great player.
Philadelphia or Cavaliers?
Cavaliers.
Okay.
So even with Thompson and Love hurt, like guard is still their problem. So it's kind of weird that they're targeting Jordan. But at the same time, like Jordan is probably the best player that's actually available in trade right now in all of the NBA. So I'm not opposed to them trying to get him.
Yeah. That would be good, but then, like I said, I just don't think LeBron James, he's not staying after the season, even then, right? Like,
I think we talked about this last week, but supposedly Gilbert says he refuses to trade this Brooklyn Nets draft pick in case LeBron leaves and they need to rebuild. And LeBron refuses to commit to staying if they won't trade the draft pick to get them help. So it's already finished, right? I mean,
love it.
Things change in the NBA. Like, who thought that he ever would have come back after he left originally? But right now, yeah, it's not looking very good. I mean, when you've got J.R. Smith and who are some of these other players, like they're just giving a lot of players minutes that are
J.R.
producers.
Channing Frye, Jay Crowder underperforming, being one of your best players is horrible. Let's get on to some other teams. So here's some fun ones. Greg Monroe to Boston. We like it. I like this in particular. I liked him in Milwaukee. He was their second best player last season. He had injury, wasn't getting played this season. They traded him to Phoenix, and then Phoenix waived him. I like him off the bench for Boston. We've seen this kind of thing work okay before. David Lee in San Antonio, for instance. So we'll see how that turns out. And what I also like about this too, to the exact same point you're making about like Isaiah Thomas, what you don't want to do is to give the keys to an injured player or give the keys to a rookie. Like that's why we didn't like Emmanuel Mudiay in Denver. I love the idea of a player that has been productive in the past to a not expensive contract. I haven't even looked up the details, Brian, but I'm sure it's not for that much. I love the idea of a bench player that has had a high ceiling in the past. That works really well. So like that to Boston. And I think he's supposed to make his debut tomorrow.
Someday Jeremy Evans is going to bust out, Trey. Someday.
Sure it will, Brian. When you win $1 billion in Powerball and buy a team, maybe.
Oh, yeah, he's a starter on my team for sure.
Tyler Zeller to Milwaukee. A friend of the show, Ty Willinghams, has been livid for a while now about Milwaukee's refusal to play normal basketball, to have a legit center. That's one of their biggest weaknesses, rebounding, etc. So getting him a legit center, and Tyler Zeller is one we like, so that's a good move. Miritic, we were talking about
one more thing on that, Dre, real fast. I saw a stat on Reddit today. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I want to say it's close to this if I'm not quite there, that the Bucks are 7-1 since firing Jason Kidd and getting rid of that crazy defense we were talking about, and they're also the #1 D rating team during that stretch in the NBA.
So with
like a 95 or 97 D rating, something like that.
To refresh people's memories, that's horrible news the Pistons are looking really good with Blake Griffin, and now if Milwaukee's looking good there, that's just two teams that are looking to basically pass Cleveland. And then we might talk this a little too. The Washington Wizards without John Wall are looking like a better team. Now, the funny thing here, this is really rough, and this might be like a Lou Gehrig-ish situation. I don't remember the player that Lou Gehrig replaced, but like the way it goes is there's another player that said, hey, I want to take a day off or whatever. And this might be made up, by the way, because I think I heard it on a TV show. So if you're a baseball aficionado, you might know the story better than me. Basically, the person that Lou Gehrig replaced took a day off. Lou Gehrig started in front of him, played well. Lou Gehrig won the starting gig, just kept playing, and then got the streak until Cal Ripken Jr. for the longest, number of games played in Major League Baseball. So essentially, the Wizards are in the same situation. Satoransky is playing like a much better point guard than John Wall, even though we would have said, so here's the interesting part. The last couple of seasons, we would say, not MVP caliber or not even all NBA point guard.
Pretty good.
But pretty good. Because I was going to say, let's just admit this. The NBA has gotten really, really, really rough in terms of the top echelon of point guards. Steph Curry, Chris Paul, James Harden getting played at point guard, Russell Westbrook. That is like the most absurd and stacked the point guard position has been in a while. So to say John Wall isn't one of the top 5 point guards in the NBA isn't a dig, but he was a really, really good point guard up through last season. This season he hasn't played well again. Could be injury, could be age, whatever. So he got injured and he's out for a while. And his backup point guard is a young player. And this could be a Malcolm Brogdon-ish situation from last season where you have a young player just plays above their head for a while. Even Ben Simmons at the start of the season did this. So when people are going, are they better without John Wall? Are they a better team without John Wall? The answer is, well, right now, yes. But because you have a young player playing really well and John Wall is having an off season, I don't want to use that as proof to diss John Wall as a bad player, because we even disagree. Even though this season we will say we think he's a below average player, in the past couple of years we've said he's a very good player.
Yeah, and there's some drama with him and Gortat, and now maybe they're going to trade Gortat, and I don't know. That's all weird. But yeah, the Wizards have had a pretty good starting lineup the last year or two. They just haven't had much help on the bench. Like even Beal has been pretty decent recently. But if they can find a way, again, DeAndre Jordan, that amazing player who's available, if they can somehow trade Gortat for him or something like that, that'd be great for them. But yeah, like the East is funny because you were talking a little earlier, Dre, about how the Cavaliers are falling down and who could be passing them right now. If we go back to that tab real fast and we're looking at league-wide margin of victory and SRS, Houston's back to #1 again. They're back above Golden State. Toronto Raptors are right with them, and those 3 teams are kind of putting some separation on. So Raptors have been the class of the East so far this season. They've been well ahead of even Boston.
So, and by the way, can I throw something out here because you had me impressed with the Bucks and their improved defense. I looked over their last 8 games, and this has been a question I've had in general about coach firing. I want to rattle off their opponents to you: Phoenix, Brooklyn, Chicago, Philadelphia. I'll give them Philadelphia. Philadelphia, though, that's a win. They lost to Minnesota, barely beat New York, beat Brooklyn, beat New York. So basically, they got to beat up on Brooklyn, New York, and Phoenix. Like, so I want to hold my judgment here. And I've had this question too. Like, you might expect some mean reversion when a team's doing poorly is usually when a coach gets fired. If a team is playing below what you'd expect, and then they get a run of really easy competitors, I'm not going to give that too much credit, especially as they got destroyed by the Minnesota Timberwolves, like the only team in that bunch. Like, we love Philadelphia, but that's why I want LeBron James there. Philadelphia is a 500-win team right now, and that's with, at the very, very start of the season, as we noted, Robert Covington playing out of his damn mind, and he's not anymore. So, like, Philadelphia right now is a probably below 500 team. If we're being honest with ourselves, they're above 500 team because of the start of the season. They only beat one above 500 team, which is Philadelphia. It got smoked by the only legit contender in that time frame. So I'm not over the moon just yet. But they're in a really good spot actually going forward for the next couple of games. Like, they have a relatively good schedule for a while, so they're looking good to be in a playoff spot for Milwaukee. But I want to be careful about being like, the new coach has fixed the defensive scheme, when the answer is they played some really, really, really bad teams.
Hey, well, that's a good time to fire a coach, right, when you're about to go on an easy schedule, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so another point, Mirotic, the trade that we said was stupid to ignore, the Pelicans relented, and he went through. He got a second year for $12.5 million, which is really nothing. Although,
did an extra player get added to the deal? Tony Allen or something?
Whatever. I mean, they did
Doesn't
something.
Probably matter.
It was Mirotic and deck chairs, basically, is how that trade worked out. He had one really good game for Chicago, for New Orleans, one really bad game for New Orleans, and then tonight's game was canceled due to a leaky roof. So results are mixed, but we basically said we thought that was a good move. We said trading for Mirotic on his contract for a year and a half without he's been playing the season is a fantastic maneuver, especially if DeMarcus Cousins is injured and you don't know how he's going to come back. We like it. You noted the Knicks. This is interesting. Kristaps Porzingis injured, which normally we would. This is the rough one. Like Dave Barry even tweeted out about this. Normally we're like, Kristaps Porzingis is not a good big, right? We think he's a good shooter and a good shot blocker that doesn't do the rest of the things that a big needs to do if you're going to play them as a starting big in the NBA. So we think he's a below average player. Maybe if he was played as a small forward or fixed a few parts of his game, he could be better. So we think he's a bad player. So normally that would be good, except the Knicks then traded away. Did they trade away Hernan?
They did. Gomez? Yeah. So here's why I was kind of annoyed about this is someone in the media, I didn't get the tweet, unfortunately, but it's, you know how it is, right? It's just like whoever their contact is in the front office of the team is just feeding them this and they're putting it out, right? So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the line is something like, well, with Porzingis out, now, clearly this is a tanking year. So it's not like they were blowing things up or blowing everyone else up to begin with, right? They were still kind of a bad team with this player Porzingis, who's probably not going to hurt the team by being injured. They're probably going to be better off playing more, Cantor and O'Quinn or whoever else they're going to.
Cantor, O'Quinn, yeah.
Yeah, so they're going to be better off without him probably. So that's a weird thing to say. And then the second part of that statement was like, well, we're going to look to get younger or whatever in our moves, right? Because it's the deadline. So what are we going to do in our deadline? It's like, so getting rid of your veteran players like Hernan Gomez, who's 23 and pretty good for a young player, like that's the veteran you're getting rid of. So it's just weird logic by the Knicks as usual.
Bad teams stay bad. I mean, just the Knicks, and I was very, so let's see, here was the fun comparison. The Knicks have fewer wins in the playoffs in the span that James Dolan has been the owner as the Los Angeles Clippers. The Los Angeles Clippers, pre-Chris Paul era, and they're going back to it, were kind of known as the pinnacle of bad teams in the NBA.
They won a series with Elton Brand, right? In the early 2000s?
Yeah, I think that might have been against the Nuggets. I think there was something with Memphis and the Clippers where they both where they were playoff tanking, if this makes sense. Like, essentially, it paid to get a worse seed because you got to play Denver, which was rough. But anyway, but they just had years without making playoffs, and Donald Sterling, right,
Yep.
was notoriously just a horrible owner. And to your point about like Elton Brand, like he would heckle Baron Davis on the sidelines and stuff. So, they were the pinnacle of bad team. The Knicks, since James Dolan has owned them, have been a worse team than the Clippers. Now, admittedly, the Clippers lucked into Chris Paul, but I'm just saying they have not been a well-run team, and a lot of those wins they had were with Marcus Camby making a finals runs, and then Marcus Camby making a late playoff run the year after, which we're very familiar with that story because that's Art Rondeau when he was helping coach Allen Houston. So anyway, like basically, if you remove the first 2 seasons, which had nothing to do with that owner, we've talked this a lot about smart owners, right? Like the Lacob or whoever else acquired the Warriors, how they inherited Steph Curry and Draymond Green, and that's huge. So anyway, just at that point, the Knicks are not a well-run team. So it's always funny when these poorly run teams say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let's be meaner. This poorly run team that's been doing a plan for years is doing poorly. And they say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to start over. That would be like if you were failing a course and your logic was, well, I'm just going to take it again next semester. And you go, are you going to change anything about how you take the course? Like, no, I'm still going to drink. I'm still going to party. I'm still not going to study. You're like, well, you're just wasting your parents' money, which is actually a pretty apt metaphor here because, essentially a lot of owners treat the NBA kind of like college, just kind of do it. And then at the end, they get to collect a paycheck because they sell the team for more than it's worth.
Speaking of Dolan, Dre, we have an update here from the Yes Network webpage, which is that Lou Gehrig made his MLB debut on 1923. He was a defensive replacement for Wally Pipp. So there you go.
Thank you. And then that's by the way, so that was, it's funny is I put a softball to you for our transition to the next subject, and then you did a Dre where you pulled a tangent that completely spliced it. So the next one I was going to say,
it was a short tangent though, so it's way different from yours.
Oh, that's good. All right, I'll give you that one. That was Giannis jumping over what was it, Tim Hardaway? Did you see that this week?
Oh no, I didn't. But he's had some good ones this year.
I'll start talking. Look this up. I know YouTube, wherever we'll have it. It's Giannis jumps over a player. And I forget. I thought it was Tim Hardaway. It could be someone else. Anyway, so Forbes just came out with their valuation of teams. Now, admittedly, I'll say there's a bit iffiness of the valuation because the valuation of a team really is based on the market of billionaires. And that's not a huge market. But you basically said the crazy note is all the NBA teams are now worth over $1 billion. And so a lot of these people that got in at the right time, this includes like the new owners of the Bucks, or I think the old new owners, whatever. The Bucks owners did something weird where they demanded a new stadium or whatever. Obviously, the Warriors owners, but all of these owners got in at a great time. All of these teams are worth more than $1 billion now. And just the only real point I want to bring to that is, we're going to come up to a CBA, and LeBron James was astutely noticing this. You're not allowed to be a part owner of an NBA team. Michael Jordan had to give up his ownership stake in the Washington Wizards. He wasn't like a majority owner, he just owned part of the team. When he went back to play for the Washington Wizards, he had to give up his ownership to play for them. You can't do that. So when they're going to go up to players and say, we're losing money, you have to take a pay cut. The reality is, since players aren't allowed to own parts of the team and then basically get part of the price increase when the valuation goes up, that's just more BS. And then you said the line you put in the script, Brian, which I was like, look at all these values increases, even for the crap teams. I mean, I think a lot of this has to do with, sports are one of the last bastions left for, live coverage. It's just so huge. NBA really, when you're looking at kind of the fighting, the infighting in football, and not to mention before all of this bullshit about deciding if the NFL was America's game and that not standing for a flag. We didn't talk the anthem that much actually on the Super Bowl, whatever. Not standing for the anthem made every one of these players that, basically isn't able to walk by age 50, not American. Before all that, there were already issues with CTE and mothers not wanting their kids to play football. I've told my wife and I have agreed our son is never playing football. The basic agreement we're going to have with him is, we're your legal guardians till you're 18 and we've set up a college fund. And we're responsible for your college, over 18. So you are not allowed to play football while we're your legal guardians. And obviously we're not putting you in school if you're going to play football. So, when he's an adult, he can make his own decisions, but we're going to nudge very hard against football. So football is already in bad shape, despite the fact that it's the biggest sport in the United States. And then baseball is just kind of an aging game that refuses to change with the time. So basketball really is the sport of the future, just in a fantastic shape. So that there's a lot going for that. So all that's looking great. The counterpoint to that, counterpoint to that, Brian, is this fact that I don't think Kevin Draper wrote it, but he linked to it. This article that basically said a cash crunch is coming for the NBA because there was this big
this is Brian Windhorst and someone else at ESPN wrote this. I'll bring that up.
Okay, and so their basic point, I'm gonna risk. I'm actually gonna look it up, and then because there's not a script on. It's my fault, people. I threw in this as a last minute addition to the script, but then I forgot to put it on the script. So Brian is able to look it up faster than me, but you have to hear me typing the background. And then hopefully, please no autoplay ads. Please no autoplay ads. If anybody knows how to like turn off sound on Chrome, just in general, I would love that. There's got to be. I think there is some way. I need to look this up, Brian. It's not just being stupid, but
there is a way to do it. Yeah.
But so there was this point, Timofey Mozgov and who was the other guy that they traded? It was Timofey Mozgov and Luol Deng. There was this offseason with the new CBA, they got this big new deal, and then they didn't restructure all the old contracts. So these teams had all of this money, and there was this blitz for a bunch of players. And, it's admittedly like a reason Nerlens Noel probably got screwed in a lot of ways, where I think he was expecting a big payday because, Bismack Biyombo the season before got a huge payday, and then the market was dry. So basically, this article, if I understand it, is saying that's coming, right? They're not going to have another big influx of cash from a TV deal. The salary cap is going to normalize now that all these contracts have been signed, which means in a few years, the free agent market's going to be different. And then not only that, like we noticed this too, right? Lou Williams just signed a 3-year, $8 million deal, whereas, Austin Rivers. I always confuse Austin and Avery, but anyway, Austin Rivers got like 12 million because of that thing going on. So essentially, contracts are going to be a lot more interesting for NBA players going forward. So it's we're saying two things at the same time. The valuations of all these teams have just gone skyrocketed and look great for owners. And hey, players that were expecting this big payday based on that blitz from the TV deal, things are about to get worse for you. And then we've already noticed this, right? Like star players can never get paid what they're worth. Obviously, a lot of players, it looked great for them initially, right? Like Steph Curry's going to crack 30 million, but because of how the salary cap works, that's just going to level off. So it's a funny two sides of the same coin argument.
Yeah, and I haven't seen, any kind of Michelle Roberts comments about this. She's the head of the Players Union right now, but I mean, I just thought back to a year or two ago or whenever it was when they were negotiating the CBA, and everyone and their mother in the NBA ownership groups are saying, "Oh, we're losing money," right?
There's no player bigger.
That was by the way, for apparently Sports Illustrated said you did not talk enough about the Super Bowl. Talk more about the Super Bowl. So that's what that just was. Apologies, that's my bad, rookie mistake. Anyway, back to you, Brian.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it, right? Like when we see the value of these franchises going up so much, I think it's pretty clear that there is a lot of smoke. I mean, a lot of fire behind the smoke of, Michelle Roberts and the Players Union's comments is that the owners just aren't negotiating in good faith in terms of what of their revenue they actually put into that BRI pot, the basketball-related revenue, to split up with the players, right? To give the players the 51%. So let's go to this Forbes article here. Back to that. So we were just talking about the Knicks and how bad of a franchise they are in terms of wins and losses. Well, they're the number one valued franchise, right? And they pretty much always have been. They're valued at $3.6 billion. So why should they even try to win? And I mean, it's related to a lot of different stuff, right? Like it's not all apples to apples. The Knicks own, the Yes Network. They own Madison Square Garden.
Well, Arturo's brought this up before on owning a winning or losing team. So when they say we're losing money, the real way to think of it, to be like honest with yourself, would be like, let's say you had, hypothetically, you did it right and it never went down. You invested in Bitcoin. Let's say that your
okay. Hypothetically,
your Bitcoin account. So let's say you invested in Bitcoin, and it makes me sad. So when I was at Google, people were like joking about it. They're like, "Oh yeah, I have a little machine in the back running Bitcoin for fun." I would have loved to have just for fun, like, I have so many stupid basketball side projects I'd done. If I'd ever just made like a Bitcoin miner in like 2008 when I first heard about it, and just like they were saved on the cloud. So I was using cloud at that point, right? So I would saved them on the cloud and just forgotten about them. And it gets to 20,000. I could have been like, I have 5 Bitcoins. Heck, I'll sell it. So dang it, I should have been wasting my time on Bitcoin instead of basketball back in the day. Anyway, but let's say you invest in a Bitcoin account when they were like $1, and you have to pay a fee. So every year you're paying like $10 for this account, and you're like, my Bitcoin, you're like, this Bitcoin account is losing me $10. But then after 5 years, you get to sell all of your Bitcoins for 20,000 in Bitcoin before the crash because you're smart or whatever. That's what basketball teams are doing, where they're going, we are losing operating cost every year when you factor in player salaries minus cost of upkeep minus clever creative accounting. That's one of our points, is that gets very sketch because all of the numbers seem to say you should have a trivial time paying for your player salaries and the cost of keeping that stadium running. The Knicks, for example, had their electricity paid by the city at one point. So anyway, but even if we take them at their word, not clever accounting, we go, yeah, but that thing is increasing in value every year. And at the end of the pot, right, Donald Sterling, you're able to sell for $2 billion, or the Knicks, if they sold, could be for billions, right? The Rockets just sold for billions. But the reason that is, like in the Knicks case, it's because they're in a big market. That's part of their edge, right? And then in other teams' cases, so for instance, the Knicks as well. And then if we're talking, say, the Golden State Warriors right now, the Golden State Warriors are going to win multiple titles. That's already happened, so I'm saying present tense, but probably going to win 3 or 4 titles at minimum, right? That seems likely, barring injury. I was tweeting out about that this week, Brian. The big effing asterisk everybody has on projections is asterisk, assuming all players healthy, which is the most ludicrous assumption to make in professional sports. But anyway, the Warriors are going to be a multi-title team by the end of everything, when all is said and done, with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, Draymond Green. And they will have paid them. Those titles are going to be worth so much in the future. And the same has been true with the Knicks, right? The Knicks haven't won a title in almost 50 years now. Geez. And, same, right? Celtics, it's going to be a decade. The Lakers, it's, 5+ years at this point. Winning titles and having good play gets people invested in your franchise. Dave Barry's research and Wages of Win showed this, right? You're more likely to want to watch a team that's been good in the past. Their history is good for you. So all of these players that are getting paid a salary and being told, we're losing money on you because our operating costs, well, that's a double whammy, because those players are basically investing in the value of the franchise going forward, and they're not going to see that, and they're not allowed to own the team. So it's extra BS, right? When you're saying the blowing smoke, it's right. It's saying to Curry, I'm losing money operating costs, which I tweeted that out about this, right? I said in a couple of years, when people are talking about how the Warriors can't afford Klay Thompson's extension, or the Warriors can't afford Steph Curry and Kevin Durant anymore, something like that. That's gonna happen, by the way. You know that, Brian. Hate to ruin Christmas for you and say Santa Claus isn't real, but that's about to happen. When that happens, what you're going to have to remember is they're talking operating costs. They're not talking value of the franchise. And then in 10 years, when the owners get bored or get old or whatever and sell the team for another $1 billion, you're going to go, that was the value. So that's where it's at. And that's always been the case. We'll see what happens. LeBron James made some astute observations about these valuations going in the past. We've mentioned Michelle Roberts seems pretty savvy. So I'm excited to see the next CBA, but it's very similar. I brought up this metaphor before, the WWE. They get me excited. Shinsuke Nakamura wins the Royal Rumble, and I'm like, maybe I'll watch again. And I guarantee you WrestleMania is going to disappoint me, and I'm not going to resubscribe to the WWE network.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens in the NBA. So for one thing, again, going back to the previous CBA negotiations, I haven't read any postmortems on it, but what it seems like happened based on how things went is that the TV revenue just kind of went up so much that they're like, okay, we're all kind of making money. We don't need to put the screws to each other. Let's just let it roll and everyone will make money, right? The actual, the smart decision. But there's been rumblings last month even, as recently, that Kevin Durant really, really wants to own an NBA team at some point, and maybe even not before he's done playing. So, what if the lockout had happened? What's to stop the players from just starting their own league? Like, what value do the owners actually provide here? Like, well,
we've said that before, and it's really rough, and just nothing's going to change. And I think a large part of that is the fan base has a very inelastic demand, meaning as long as you put something in front of them, they don't care. And we were talking about the Super Bowl at the beginning, where there are all of these behind-the-scenes stories involving at minimum, asshole athletes, and in maximum, some major annoying cases involving like racism and stuff. And you put a game on in front of people and they want to forget that and they don't care. So with sports, when you take people's sports away, they get upset. And if you give it back, they don't care. They don't care about the behind the scenes. So that's always been the rough part about taking out the owners for the players, is because essentially the fans go, just give me back my game. Give me back my game. That's all I want. So it makes it really, really hard to just like start a rival league, because the fans are like, I don't care about your hardships. I just want to watch you play in a competitive setting. And then there's a lot of stuff in place. I mean, I'm sure there's also, like when the NBA and ABA collapsed, there were like rules about who owned which thing. So there might even be statewide regulations for new leagues and all that. So it's entirely possible.
You're talking about territories, right?
Yeah. And I think it would just be much harder. And I think a really, really hard part, I was talking about this too, about, so Kevin Durant, we've noted, seems really bitter about being picked second. They were joking about it for the All-Star game. And people going, hey, he's still better. And I noted he lost $2.2 million by being picked second by the rules. A lot of these athletes have a 5-year window to make.
You mean in the in the draft, in the
contract? He was picked
the amateur draft, not this year's All-Star draft.
When he was picked second in the NBA draft, they structure contracts based by your draft pick. So if you're picked number 2 instead of number 1, the end result was about $500,000 a year for Kevin Durant. That was lost money. And if you do compound interest, had he been able to invest that money every year, and now what it's be at, like, that's a lot of money he left on the table. And a lot of these players get a 5 to 10 year window. And this has always been the case. The owners can just shut the door, say, a lot of you are losing your livelihood. Every second that ticks by is thousands of dollars. For most of you, hundreds of thousands of dollars for others of you. For those of you who want legacies like LeBron James, losing a season, loses a shot at a title, we're just going to hold the door shut. And that works. That works effectively well, because these players know they're missing out on money, they're missing out on accolades, et cetera. And that's always just going to work. So yeah, it's like the owners don't provide much, but the one thing they do really have is they're going, the amount of time it would take you to start a new league that could rival us from start to finish, most of your careers are done. And none of you can make that sacrifice.
And that's the real thing, right? So first, this is one of the biggest chapters from the original Wages of Wins, right? Which is stating basically whenever work stoppages happen in a pro sports league, the fans just always come back. There's never a economic penalty, really.
It's like the only 2 cases that seem to have a major impact. These seem to be very related. The NBA got a little worse, and that was because Michael Jordan had retired the season before. So it's like you lose your biggest name, like
that's a confounding variable.
Like WWE saying like, "Oh man, this lockout screwed us." And if you said something like, "Well, Hulk Hogan got suspended for steroid use around that time or whatever," that would be one. And then the other one was like World War II. So like, if you look at the data, like the only 2 points where a work stoppage actually seemed to show a decline in demand was when he's up there with Jerry West, right? The Air Jordan logo is almost as synonymous with basketball as the logo that's Jerry West. When that guy retired after winning his 3rd title, which for, parity and balance and all that should be a telling thing. And then the entire world went to war. Those have been the only 2 times. So
I just think times are changing a little bit. They are changing slowly. And that's the big thing is you're right. Like players would take a big hit initially. And you're right. Their careers aren't long enough. So they are kind of trapped in this, not a prisoner's dilemma, but something similar to that, right? That they probably could never break free. But
we talked a lot about, like, bring us back to racism, the racism show, about like implicit biases. A lot of times the reason people act in ways that we might see as bad, as as a net effect of being racist or whatever, is it's comfortable. And people, when they're comfortable, they don't like to get out of their comfort zone. And a lot of times addressing problems means being uncomfortable. And in many cases, being uncomfortable and fixing that discomfort means a sacrifice. So that's the problem is with the NBA, for the players to fix this problem would be having many of them be uncomfortable and make huge sacrifices. And for a lot of them to just say, I just want to cash my paycheck and play my game. I can't fault that because that's how most people behave.
Yeah. And just to finish that point off, going back to your example, the white Philadelphia Eagles fans versus, a Black Lives Matter protest destroying property. I mean, that's the difference there, right? One of those threatens people and the other doesn't in their minds.
All right. So no soft landing to this, our last subject. It was actually before Forbes, but there's an easy transition to Forbes. Video games. So you and I occasionally talk speed runs. We enjoy this stuff, Brian. We're on Twitch, so why not? But a really fun one, just to drama that makes the steroid era scandals in Major League Baseball just look trivial. This is the perfect postscript to the King of Kong documentary. For those of you that know, hope I get the names right. What's Billy's last name? Just so I can.
So the two main characters of King of Kong documentary were Billy Mitchell and Steve Wiebe.
Okay, so the story is Billy Mitchell is this big-time hotshot gamer. I believe the first person to get a perfect score on Pac-Man from the 80s, back when Atari came out.
The golden age of the arcades. He was the poster boy of it.
Exactly. Steve Wiebe is an engineer that gets laid off. That's a teacher, and in his spare time, he plays Donkey Kong on the arcade cabinet, and he manages to break Billy Mitchell's world record of Donkey Kong. And then if you watch the King of Kong movie, one thing that ended up happening is then Billy Mitchell sends in a tape that shows him beating Steve Wiebe's record. And then just all of this drama around the fights between the two, and kind of just, it's everything, right? We deal with this as an advanced basketball analytics site, but anytime you have a group of nerds, there's always weird infighting and weird cliques that form. And so Steve Wiebe's this weird outsider that's challenging the norm and whatever. And there's like a scene where he goes to the arcade and one of Billy Mitchell's fans is like staring over his shoulder and trying to distract him. And you're like, and
right, this is the narrative of the documentary you're saying right now, right?
The narrative of the documentary is like Steve, he's the outsider. All these insiders are like, what's he doing here? And then when he breaks the record, it's a big deal. But then Billy Mitchell has to come take it back. And the story, the postscript now is it appears that Billy Mitchell's record, that by the way, they've all been shadowed. Like that documentary made it so popular that they're I believe they're like top 24 on the list, top 25. Their scores respectively. They've been beating a lot of times. Like a surgeon broke it. I think it just got broken again. So at this point, their records, that story is over. It's the same point we make about like basketball. Historical teams, the great Celtics of the 60s, the great Celtics of the 70s, the great Celtics, right? Celtics and Lakers of the 80s, Bulls of the 90s, whatever. These teams just would not compete with a modern team because there is progression, there is advancement. And same is true with video games. These people that were amazing 10 years ago, people have been able to build on them. And I mean, in the case of speed running, which is this speed running or high scoring, is the case here, you're able to really, really build on previous work a lot easier, right? Like it's not normally the case that I could study a tape of the Chicago Bulls from the 90s and absorb all of Michael Jordan's powers, but that's essentially what happens in video games, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, people analyze the tape, and this is what makes it nuts. They basically said that Billy Mitchell cheated with the second tape he submitted to get a new high record. So he did have the original high score that he got live. Steve Wiebe broke that high score. Billy Mitchell submitted a tape of him breaking 1 million points to beat that high score. And then Steve Wiebe actually came back and beat that score. But the point being, they're saying that middle tape of Billy Mitchell breaking 1 million points for the first time was fraudulent. And that actually means that's a lot, because it actually means Steve Wiebe now holds the record for being the first person to crack 1 million points in Donkey Kong. And then it brings a lot of, scrutiny to Billy Mitchell. You said he's actually responded and saying he agrees that the tape that they analyzed is indeed fake, but it's not the tape he submitted.
That's what he said, basically, yeah. Yeah, he said it's not the Twin Galaxies tape. So, yeah, it's funny because that was the main theme of the King of Kong documentary, right? Is basically, here's this really good old boys network nerd club, Twin Galaxies, and they're excluding this outsider, Steve Wiebe, right? That was basically... And destroying old records. Yeah, and...
Also held a lot of world records. They've got to have been broken, I believe, now by the same people. But he held a lot of the world records on Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, so
Donkey Junior. I keep wanting to say Country because that's the...
Yeah, Donkey Kong Junior. So and the big part of it is when Steve Wiebe enters the scene, like you said, after he got laid off as being an engineer at Boeing, I think he starts submitting his tapes, and no one really believes him, right? So they make him walk through all these extra hoops to compete with Mitchell, basically, whereas Mitchell doesn't even have to be around or even acknowledge who he is or anything like that, right? That's basically the theme there. There is some commentary afterwards that they might have embellished. This is within like a year of the documentary. Of course, Mitchell knew who he was, and they had messed with the timeline a little, and they had already competed head-to-head at that point. So we're like, maybe they actually embellished that part a little bit. Fast forward now to 2018, and not at all. It turns out like their judging program, this referee Todd Rogers was involved in like 2 different scandals with this. So I mean, I guess King of Kong was right in the end that Twin Galaxies was a good old boys network. So there you go.
It's like to the point of like the steroid era. So here's another funny story, and I think you mentioned this in passing. So Atari, there was a world record for a game called Dragster. And I guess what's happened, the same exact thing. It's like what's made speed running and high scores in games nuts nowadays, right? Is I can take the code for that game. And I was watching, this is really fun. I was watching a YouTube video on how to do a speed run in Super Mario Brothers, not the very first one for the Nintendo or Famicom. And they were talking about this one level, I think it's 4-2, that lets you warp to level 8, which is huge. So it's a key part of any speed run. And how people basically took the code, went frame by frame. You can do this with software. Do frame by frame, and you're allowed to do any action at each frame. And basically, you can find the optimal path through a level. And so what they can say is they can go, this isn't human possible, right? Like you would have to do an action a millisecond to do this move. But in theory, you could get through this screen in 4 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever. And so these same people have gone over, same type of people, sorry. So because this is a huge community now, right? Speed runs, high scores, et cetera. Went over an old record for an Activision game called Dragster and basically said the world record for this that's held by Twin Galaxies and Activision themselves in the Guinness Book of World Records, it's impossible. It is physically impossible to get this record. You cannot do it. We've broken down the code. And then when you look into it, basically what you find is it's exactly what you said. One guy submitted the score and a friend vouched for him.
And interestingly, the guy who submitted the score in this case was the friend who vouched for Billy Mitchell in the other case. But
so that's the point.
Todd Rogers.
And so basically this score stood for years and years and years. And it was basically a guy saying, I got this record, and them saying, okay. And that's pre-internet, right? How it used to be. You'd submit your high score, someone would vouch for you, you'd say, okay. And then it was really good old boy networkish. And in fact, what's funny about the King of Kong documentary, I forget the guy's name. I haven't seen it in years. There was another guy that had some high scores that like even graced a magazine cover with Billy Mitchell. And apparently Billy Mitchell called him out because he was like, you've submitted some high scores for these games. I don't think you can get those high scores on those games. So it's a fascinating, funny world. The world of speedrunning, the world of high scores on arcade cabinets, all this stuff. And it's just this is just a nuts one that I had to touch on seeing it. And that's all I got there. If that's it, Brian, I can lead us into shout-outs related to this subject.
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. And yeah, it did remind me of the steroid era in baseball as well, just, because Billy Mitchell was legitimately one of the best guys, right? Like, he did put up really big scores in live events back in the day. And maybe, I don't know if he ever, I think he was considered to be the best player of several games at the,
Yeah.
So clearly he was really good. He didn't need to cheat. They could have
a documentary called King of Pac-Man about Billy Mitchell.
Sure.
He did a lot of stuff like First to Kill Screen, whatever, all that. It was huge.
So it reminded me of Barry Bonds is all right. Like Bonds was the best player in baseball. Sosa and McGuire start taking steroids and hitting all these home runs. People aren't talking about Bonds so much anymore. So then Bonds is like, all right, I'll join the club. I'll take steroids too.
Yeah.
So
well, there's a lot. We talk a lot about like athletic mentality and athletes mentality. And then of course I always bring up like wrestling. There is a very real high about being famous and being regarded for something. And when that's taken away from you, I'm not justifying. I'm just saying it's a funny one to go. You're in the record books for history. You're one of the most well-known names, most parodied one. I was looking at Billy Mitchell. He had a lawsuit against some cartoon show because they had a giant head that looks like Billy Mitchell. And the judge is like, yeah, it's parodying you, but it's enough of a difference that it doesn't count. Whereas, there's like fair use things where it's like, if this is supposed to be Billy Mitchell, as an example, this happened in, I believe, college sports games. If it's like, this isn't you, but it's so much you that no one would be fooled into not believing that avatar on that video game is you. You can lose that lawsuit, but they basically said no one thinks that you are a giant floating head, Billy Mitchell, on this cartoon show. But he tried to sue over that. And he's famous. He's well known. He's in the record books, right? but basically just the spotlight was starting to get removed. It's very similar to when you see Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal on sideline commentaries, and they're bashing Dwight Howard and new guys and whatever, right? Like Charles Barkley going on to bash players for being bad at shooting, for not being able to win titles shooting threes, even though he has like the distinction of being the worst volume 3-point shooter in NBA history, and bash players for being unloyal despite the fact that, he was chasing a ring hard. It's just silly, but that's what tends to happen, right? Where you basically have these people that used to be great, that used to get the accolades for fame, and that they start losing some of that fame, and we've seen it time and time again, and it's just kind of sad. They will go through absurd deaths, in some cases like legal, right? Like, Kobe Bryant did a lot of surgeries and stuff on his body to stay relevant in the sport of basketball. He probably didn't need to do that, but there's something about getting in front of thousands of fans every night that these people like.
What is the allegation? It's some kind of injection from Germany, like he would go to Germany, or...
I don't think it's illegal, but I'm saying that's the point. In his offseason, he was getting basically experimental procedures in Germany done to his knee.
Okay.
We'll see, right? Sports are arbitrary. In the future, it might be just like Tommy John surgery and every player is getting it done. It might be like steroids. There are various steroid allegations against players that were not illegal at the time, that were illegal after the fact, right? That's the key point. There was no testing, et cetera. So it's like it could go any way. It's arbitrary. But the point being, there are players in the offseason where you say, like Shaquille O'Neal is an example, hey, do you want to spend all your time in the gym and get experimental surgery done to your leg, and as a result of that surgery, you're going to have to do rehab, or do you want to go make Kazam and get paid $7 million? Like there are levels that people will go to keep themselves in the public eye. And it's understandable, even if in this case, in Billy Mitchell's case, we don't condone it if true.
Whatever it takes to be the best, Ray. If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Jeez. All right. So my shout out, and I'm going to see if I can subtly do this enough in time, is to a player for a Zelda speedrun, Zelda 2. And the reason I bring this up is I just started looking up Zelda 2 speedruns. It's one of my favorite games. It is Cantaloupe Me, I think is how you say his name, in West Virginia, United States. He has the current record for the 100% speed run of Zelda 2, which means you have to get all the items and everything, get all the keys, get all the items, get all the heart keys, etc. He has the speed run, which is in 1 hour and 18 minutes, which is absurd. I was watching the video for fun, and basically he's going to be able to beat his own record if he wants to, because at the very last second, he has to dodge one of the, if you've played Zelda 2, there are these floating skull heads that bounce around. He dodged one on a dissolving platform, and then he landed back on it, and the platform was supposed to finish dissolving, and you fall through, and that's how you get to the final boss. And there was a glitch, not a glitch in the way that it would nullify his record, a glitch in the sense that because of when he jumped, it stopped dissolving, and he got hit, and then he had to ferry down, and basically lost about 7 seconds due to this.
That's a lot of time.
Still managed to get the speedrun record on this site, but just all the feels in the world for him. But Cantaloupe Me at speedruns.com, I believe is what it's called, for Zelda 2, just amazing performance. That's my shout out. And then also I got to give a shout out. Nick Foles, after winning a Super Bowl, gave a speech on failure, which I really liked. I think it's important to talk about this, where just saying, failing and being able to come back from failure is a lot of what success is. And, we glamorize success in our culture, but it is really important to embrace failure and say it's okay to fail, and what do you learn from it, and how do you come back from it? So I really like that. That was pretty good. You've got at least one shout out, Brian. I'll let you give that, and then we'll be out.
And yeah, Kobe Bryant certainly failed a lot too. He missed a lot of shots in his career, Dre. But
100% of the shot take or something. I don't know.
Hey, no, but you're right. Lou Gehrig, not Lou Gehrig. Cy Young has the most wins of all time in the MLB, but of course he also has the most losses. So there you go. How else are you gonna get? I do. I have a gaming shout out as well. StarCraft. A game that Patrick likes as well. Where's the link? Oh, here we go. Okay. We got it up right here. TeamLiquid.com. Scarlet defeats SOS 4-1, winning IEM Pyeongchang. Pyeongchang, of course, sounds familiar right now because the Olympics are starting there in like a day or two from when we're recording. They did an esports event there leading up to the Olympics, so this is like the Olympics of StarCraft. And Scarlet from Canada, transgender female player, takes her first big international event after having success over the years in North America. a lot of failure over the past year. She's had injury problems, but she went back to Korea and trained back up again, and now she's beat a tournament that included Koreans. So very cool win for the foreign StarCraft 2 scene.
I was completely unaware that the Olympics were starting tomorrow, Brian. You are right.
That's right.
I have been out of it, apparently. And then, of course, the first hits. So I'm imagining that it will be calm and rosy the entire time to get my political talk in, because the first hits as I search for Olympics are North Korea says no plans to meet U.S. officials at Olympics. So I'm sure there will be no drama, absolutely no drama with these Olympics in South Korea. Fantastic. All right, well, that's been our show. If you found us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. Throw this out there. This is a plan. You can hold me to this one. A new plan is to start posting Monday through Thursday at nerdnumbers.com something, even if it's, just a stat or something. The first post will be the notes for this show tomorrow on Thursday. So Monday through Thursday, I know I'm starting on a Friday, essentially. So nerdnumbers.com, I'm going to start blogging again regularly, and then we'll leave the tools at boxscoregeeks.com. Check out our player comparison engine if you have not. You can find the show on iTunes and Stitcher, the Boxscore Geeks Show. Subscribe, upvote helps us out. You can find us every week live, twitch.tv/nerdnumbers. I'm just going to say Wednesday, 9:30 p.m., Brian, barring a major thing. So if we don't have a special guest that we know ahead of time, Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's our normal time, twitch.tv/nerdnumbers. If you missed the live show, you can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers at YouTube. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. If you haven't heard Nerd Numbers enough. Produced, as always, by our co-host, voice of God and man of many hats, Brian Foster, who you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. That's been our show, and we'll see you next week.